So when it comes to AI, the thing that I've actually been interested in is local AI, and that's for three reasons. Number one, I already have the hardware capable of running it, and if you're a PC gamer like I am, you probably already have the hardware too. Number two is privacy. I think that one's pretty obvious, but everything that I want to do with my system, I want to stay locally here. And number three, ultimately, is control over both the hardware that I am using, but also the data that I am generating. So in this video, I want to recount some of the journeys that I've been on setting up a local AI system, and also give Wendell a buzz to help me walk through some of this stuff because he's been helping me through this journey a lot. Before we get started, I do need to mention this video is sponsored by MSI, and what that means is that they reached out asking if I wanted to do a project setting up a local AI system with this Cubi NUC AI Plus 3MG. And I said yes. I'm actually really excited to try setting something like this up. While I was using this mini PC for this project, this whole journey was of my own making. I had complete editorial control over everything, and all opinions are my own. So with that out of the way, let's get into the project. So I'm going to work a little backwards in this video because obviously you want to set up all this local AI stuff to do something with it. But I'm going to save what I'm actually doing with it towards the end because I think it's pretty interesting and highly specialized for my needs. So I'd rather start off talking about the hardware that I'm using to set it up with, but then also the software configuration as well. So speaking of hardware, I'm obviously going to be using this MSI Cubi NUC in this project, and what I want to do is have this run the agent. Now, yes, depending on the DRAM configuration that you buy or upgrade to, because it does have upgradable DRAM, you can run local models on this as well, but I'm much more interested in having this serve as the agent itself. That means I'm going to need a different piece of hardware to run the local model itself, and that is going to be the Framework desktop. This is a Strix Halo-based platform with 64 gigs of DRAM. It should be able to run a lot of what I need to do. And really, I guess the last piece of hardware to talk about is my phone. This is the Moto Razr Fold. This is going to be what I want to use on the daily to connect to my agent. So even though this is not running anything locally, I still want to be able to use this to chat with my agent. But picking the hardware was the easy part. Really, the hardest part is figuring out the software. Not only figuring it out, but also setting it up. So I decided to call an expert, which means Wendell from Level 1 Techs, to help me walk through some of the choices that I'm going to be making for this, but then also help me configure it as well. Now, he has a really good video on the agentic loop, which I'm going to link down in the description because you should watch that as a good primer on how to think of the actual workflows themselves. I am no expert, but there were a couple things for my use cases that I wanted to ask him about. So let's give him a quick call and answer a couple of questions that are specific for my setup. Wendell, I had to give you a buzz and ask you about applications to run large language models. Obviously, I've heard of LM Studio, and that's kind of what you ultimately had me go with. But what should somebody think about when they pick one?
Well, right now today, LM Studio is a good kind of easy button solution. So it knows what your hardware is, and it knows how much memory you have, and there's a lot of guardrails there to prevent you from self-impaling, and also a lot of things to help you get the model up and running. It's pretty easy. It's pretty point and click, and they let other applications access what you're running in LM Studio programmatically, which is awesome, which means that other programs can use whatever you're running in LM Studio to do their thing, and LM Studio doesn't have to support it, which is the other key thing you needed.
What's the advantage of running LM Studio separately on a different device than the agent?
So you've got Framework Desktop, and that's Strix Halo, and that's going to be a Vulkan backend, and it's basically a dedicated appliance. And so the thing that connects to LM Studio to use its intelligence is the agent running on the Cubi NUC. And so the Cubi NUC needs to reboot, it needs to do things, there's stuff happening on the Cubi NUC, that's fine. Everything that the AI needs can keep running on the Framework Desktop. The Framework Desktop basically becomes an AI server. It becomes a substitute for the cloud. Like the Cubi NUC has an NPU, and there's this idea of retrieval augmented generation and also like vision models. And so you might have a small model running on the Cubi NUC that's helping you with PDF processing or document processing, and that little model running on the Cubi NUC might only be like 1 billion parameters. But then you can send the output of that model and that agent can talk to another agent that is using the model that's on the framework desktop, which could be 20, 30 billion parameters. And so the 1 billion parameter model and the 30 billion parameter model are talking to each other. The software that's running on the Cubi NUC can pick and choose how those things want to cooperate, or you as the operator can orchestrate that together and say, you're the manager, you're the engineer, and you pick the best model to be able to do those things.
So I did end up going with LM Studio on this framework desktop, and I decided to use the OS Ubuntu to install it on for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is a very stable and highly used distro. Number two, I'm a Linux expert. I don't know if you heard about this, so I wanted to mess around with Linux more and have a reason to do it. And number three, LM Studio actually has a native Debian installer because I didn't really want to mess around with app images. Luckily, that native Debian installer worked fantastic on Ubuntu. As somebody who's never set any of this stuff up, it was actually fairly straightforward. And yes, I did run into some troubleshooting issues, but I'm not going to get too deep into them because I think it was unique for my hardware system that I'm running. If you want to see a separate video of me trying to go through the trials and tribulations of that stuff, let me know in the comments, but I'm just going to leave most of it out here because I don't think it's going to apply to most people. And one of the things that Wendell did have me do during install of LM Studio was to enable the developer options. And even though I'm not a developer, this did give me access to some of the features like being able to run it locally over my network. Now, the last major decision to make is what model am I going to run? And I did go to the model search page and my eyes immediately glazed over. There were so many different models from so many different companies with so many different parameters, and I had no idea what would be good for my use case and for this framework desktop. So let's ask Wendell about that and why he had me pick one specific one.
So Wendell, I really need help with the model stuff because I'm looking through that list. There was a lot of different things, and like I don't keep up on model news or like what's good for what. So number one, how does somebody pick a model? I guess is
You got a little bit of homework to do, a little bit of research to do. There are lots of different models that are optimized for different things. You could start with, some of the models. Some of the most popular models are to do with speech to text and text to speech, and it's really easy to evaluate how good a text to speech model is because you can just download it and run it and then listen to it. For some of the other models, it's picking things that will run well on your hardware and how intelligent is it, how suited is it for the task that I'm trying to do. And so after some back and forth and thinking about it, Quen, and specifically the Quen, the A35B model, which is a 35 billion parameter model that only has about 3 billion parameters active at any given time. And that is a good all-rounder model because you can give it instructions. It's good at using tools and following the instructions and using the tools and the documentation and just sort of generally being able to do this, that, and the other. Because that was really one of the first models, the Quen 3.6 was really one of the first models that showed us that you could have performance in a model that's only 35 billion parameters big. The performance was as good as prior generation models that were in the 100 billion parameter range. And so you need a lot less resources to run a 35 billion parameter model than you do one that's 110 billion parameters. But you may be able to find another different model from somebody else that's more suited to what you're doing. It just depends on what you're trying to do, and there's no harm in experimenting.
Yeah, true. And I mean, you mentioned running something locally on the MSI Cubi NUC. Obviously, you can upgrade the RAM to that, but that is a Panther Lake based platform. Definitely different than Strix Halo kind of thing. So different use case. Like, what kind of models do you think would work well on the agent side itself on like a Cubi NUC?
I think definitely speech to text, text to speech, and some of the document analysis ones. So like say you had, a report folder with tons of PDFs in it going back 10 years, but you have a need to recategorize and reorganize these PDFs. Now you can send that off to the big model and that's fine, but not having to do the round trip, it may be a little faster. And so you could set up like one of the smaller models, like maybe the 1 to 3 billion parameter Quen models, or another smaller model that is made specifically for document processing. And then you can say, take these PDFs and convert them into Markdown and I will use that to send to the larger model for the more important questions. But the AI can sort of decide what it needs to do. If you had a bunch of PDFs that didn't have appropriate file names, and it's just like, this is like, we've just been making a mess on our corporate network drive. I need help organizing these documents. Let's open them up, look at what the document is, and then try to rename it to something that's reasonable. Cubi NUC can do that all day with the NPU. The NPU is actually useful in there, even outside the Panther Lake stuff, for those kinds of tasks, because that's a relatively small AI model, and it's a relatively laser-focused task that you have, and that's really the thing that kind of thing is useful for.
So with the Quen model loaded, I was ready on the model side, and I was able to run some tests locally on LM Studio to make sure it is working, and I did confirm that it was working. So now the next step is setting up the agent. Now the agent is going to be running on the MSI Cubi NUC. The agent is where I'm really going to build everything around, and for that I needed to make a decision. Now obviously there's been a lot of talk about OpenClaw. I've known people who've used OpenClaw. Everyone at Computex seemed to have some sort of OpenClaw variant, including MSI, but I've been hearing a lot of buzz about Hermes agent as a way to kind of have it learn as you're doing things. So I was a little confused by the two options, but I kind of knew I wanted to go a little bit towards the Hermes agent path. So let's give Wendell another buzz and see what he thinks about the difference between OpenClaw and Hermes agent.
All right, so Wendell, another thing I want to ask you about are agents. How does somebody go about picking an agent? And also, you mentioned something to me offline about recursive self-improvement. How does that fit in?
Agents. So the agent harness sometimes is what that's called. And the agent harness, like picking an agent harness, is as personal as picking your favorite dessert. OpenClaw took off because that was kind of the first one. Hermes is the same idea, but a little bit more mature architecturally. And it has a little bit more of a safety architecture, and it has a little bit more stuff in there to help you with managing the system, like the system aspects of it. Like, I need these programs, I need this sandbox, this is how I'm going to work with like a code editor, this is how I'm going to work to accomplish this. If you set up this agent and you give it a task, and the task is kind of what's called a hill climbing task, where it's like, this is what success looks like, this is what I want you to do, this is what I want you to work on, but I know the output is like this, you're going to have to get there. It can run through what it thinks it needs to do, look at its output or look at where it is, and then look at the criteria for success that you gave it, and then it can decide, I need to keep going, I need to spend more tokens, or I need to stop, or this meets the success criteria. And it can go over and over and over, and then you've spent a crazy amount of tokens. But if they're all local tokens, it doesn't matter, because you can spend 1 million tokens and it might be 25 cents of electricity, whereas 1 million tokens in the cloud might be $12 or $25, which is where we're at with the cost per token now, which is alarming. Then you get this idea of recursive self-improvement. Now that's really talking about like the AI itself. Like, the success criteria is, as an AI, you should do this, like your output should be this good. This is the thing that you should, as an AI, you should know. You should have enough stuff to do that. But if you use one of these agents and you're able to explain the task or outline the task in such a way that this is guaranteed success criteria, this is what we know exactly what success looks like, but it's up to the AI to fill in the steps of how to get to that success. It looks a lot like recursive self-improvement.
So I did end up going with Hermes Agent, installed it on this MSI Cubi NUC using the download from the website, and there was a GUI-based installer, which was awesome. Now Hermes did ask me to try to connect to a lot of cloud-based services, but luckily I have my own setup. So that's what I wanted to configure, and it was a little bit buried in the options. I had to go in and find the place where I would actually have it connect to LM Studio via a unique URL. I didn't need a key or anything like that. I just needed to make sure that the Hermes agent was pointing to LM Studio, and then LM Studio was listening on a local network. And once that was all connected, it worked. I was able to type a command in Hermes Agent, ask it a question, and see LM Studio actually fire up with the response. And I gotta say, as somebody who is a noob to all this AI stuff, it was actually really nice to see the command console in real time with the queries and how it was breaking things down in text, because I've never seen like what AI was thinking as it was doing something. And so like I actually kind of like that it spells that stuff out, and so I can kind of follow along and be like, huh, okay, well that's what it's doing right now, and that's the reasoning it's taking, and that's what it's trying to do. And luckily I can see that in Hermes Agent, but I can also peek in LM Studio and see some of that stuff as well. So then the last piece of the hardware puzzle is to connect it to my phone, and I decided to use a Telegram to connect to Hermes Agent because supposedly that's kind of the easiest thing to set up to make sure that you can chat with it in real time. And I've actually never used Telegram before, so I had to sign up for it, get a key, and connect it to Hermes Agent. And once that was all set up, I was actually able to chat with it. I don't have to look in LM Studio. I don't have to look in Hermes Agent. I can just interface with it through Telegram on my phone from anywhere. And that is actually pretty awesome. So now that I had all the hardware set up and all the software set up, the last big question was, what am I doing with this AI agent? And that is something that I had to sit down for a long time and think and be like, okay, well, I'm not coding, I'm not doing any sort of image generation, I'm not doing any writing, I don't have tax documents that I need to have it look over. So I had to really hone in and think, what during my work week would I need the most help with, and something that I would really like to have an agent go out and figure out for me, and that is research. Because I have two podcasts. I have The Full Nerd, where I cover desktop DIY PC topics, and then I have Expedition Handheld, where I cover handheld gaming topics. And to tell you the truth, it is hard sometimes to stay atop of all the news that is coming in. So my idea was to set up the agent to give me timely digests and kind of scrape the internet and figure out all the things that people are talking about, so that I am more easily informed. But it does end up taking a lot of time in my workday, and it would be nice to have something just delivered to me on my phone and say, hey, here are the top stories within the past 24 hours. And so yeah, I set up two digests, one for The Full Nerd, once again looking for PC hardware topics, and then the second one for Expedition Handheld, looking for handheld gaming device news. And I gotta be honest, this is where the story is kind of a TBD as of right now, because I'm very early on this kind of stuff, and yes, I do have working digests that are supposedly delivered to me every morning, but sometimes they don't hit, or sometimes I'm running into errors with scraping the web. Wendell actually had me connect with a service called Tavily that is supposedly better able to scrape the internet than just straight Google search for this AI agent stuff. So yes, while I kind of have a working version right now, like a lot of good projects, I think I might have to end up just scrapping this and starting fresh and trying something new, because it is a little cumbersome and it isn't working the way it's intended. And usually when I have an issue like that, I think, okay, well then I'm maybe not as explicitly clear in the steps that I need to do, and I need to keep it focused. So as of right now, where I'm going to end this video is all the hardware working great, all the software great as well. I mean, I guess I don't really have comparison points to it, so maybe I'll try a different piece of software, and I'm sure you will let me know in the comments which one is going to be better. But then third, I want to continue to kind of poke away at this and figure out the best way to get that helper, that agent, to research the things that I need through my work week, because that does save me a lot of time to kind of get that in a way that is easier for me to digest. And once again, thanks to MSI for sponsoring this video, because it really kicked off this whole journey, and this was something I was going to do eventually anyway, but because of the sponsorship, I did it now rather than later, and man, have I learned a lot. Like, I'm, once again, not a professional at all when it comes to this AI stuff, and a lot of it goes over my head, but I feel like I'm starting to learn a little bit of it, and I am enjoying having all of this stuff running locally. And really, for me, the next step, other than like troubleshooting the actual digest and the research kind of stuff from that, is to move the framework desktop running LM Studio to the office. I don't need to have that here locally, and I can just put that in the office and have it run in a cool, safe environment, and then have my agents connect to that. So it has been fun times indeed, and I got to know, are you running anything locally? Are you interested in it? What are you worried about? I'm no expert in any of this stuff, but maybe I can help you down in the comments, or can I point you over to Level 1 Techs, who does a lot of this kind of work and knows way more than I ever will about it. So thank you for listening to my journey, and hopefully I will have a follow-up video sometime soon talking about the next steps I took to build this stuff out. And until then, be sure to subscribe here on PC World, and I'll catch you in the next video.